She was betrayed by her own blood. The brother she'd protected all her life stood there, calling her a fraud in front of everyone. He said she was nothing but a glorified secretary playing pretend. But their grandmother had left something behind, something that would change everything. What he was about to learn would bring him to his knees. My name is Eleanor Thorne, and at 42 years old, I found myself sitting in an attorney's office, listening to my younger brother Marcus tear apart everything I'd worked for. The heavy oak conference table between us felt like an ocean, but it wasn't wide enough to protect me from his words. "You're nothing but a paper pusher who got lucky with a government job," Marcus said, his voice dripping with contempt. His wife Cassandra sat beside him, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her designer purse, a satisfied smirk playing at her lips. "For 20 years you've been pretending to be some kind of important federal employee, letting everyone believe you're special when you're just another office worker stamping forms all day." The law office felt suffocating. Mr. Whitmore, who had been our family's attorney since we were children, shifted uncomfortably in his leather chair. He'd watched us grow from grieving orphans raised by our grandmother into adults now fighting over her final wishes. Marcus leaned forward, his face flushed with the same righteous anger I remembered from our childhood. "Grandmother Evelyn left you the house because she believed your lies. But I know the truth. Cassandra did her research. She has connections at the Justice Department, and they've never heard of you doing anything remotely important." Cassandra's smile widened. "My contacts were very clear, Eleanor. You're basically a low-level administrator who processes paperwork. Nothing more. The way you let Evelyn believe you were some kind of hero, it's honestly pathetic." The words cut deep because they held just enough truth to sting. "I did work at a desk sometimes. I did process extensive paperwork. I did wear a simple government-issued uniform that looked unremarkable to most people. But what they didn't understand, what they'd never bothered to ask about, was everything else." I watched Marcus's face, remembering the scared little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. Now he was a successful businessman, owner of a construction empire he'd built from nothing, and he looked at me like I was something he'd scrape off his shoe. "The point is," Marcus continued, his voice rising, "I'm contesting the will. There's no reason a desk clerk needs a $4 million estate when I'm the one who actually made something of myself. I built an empire while you've been sitting in some windowless government office, filing reports no one will ever read." Mr. Whitmore cleared his throat softly. "Actually, Marcus, before we proceed any further, I need to share something. Your grandmother anticipated this exact situation might arise." "What do you mean?" Cassandra's voice sharpened like a blade. "Evelyn left very specific instructions. If anyone challenged Eleanor's inheritance based on her professional standing, I was to open this." He pulled out a cream-colored envelope from his desk drawer. Our grandmother's elegant handwriting spelled out across the front for my dearest Eleanor. "When they doubt your truth." "Open it," Marcus demanded, his confidence wavering slightly. Inside was a single sheet of our grandmother's personal stationery and a smaller, official-looking envelope bearing the seal of the Department of Justice. Mr. Whitmore's eyebrows rose as he read the handwritten note aloud. "My precious Eleanor, if this letter is being read, it means Marcus still doesn't understand the sacrifices you've made for our country. I've always known why you couldn't share the details of your work, why you came home exhausted and sometimes injured, why you missed so many family gatherings because duty called. The enclosed letter might help them understand. With all my love, Grandmother Evelyn." The attorney opened the official envelope carefully, pulling out a document on Department of Justice letterhead. His eyes widened as he scanned its contents. "What is it?" Marcus's voice had lost its earlier bravado. "It's a commendation letter," Mr. Whitmore said slowly, signed by the Attorney General himself, "for exceptional service in federal law enforcement." "That's impossible," Cassandra whispered. Mr. Whitmore continued reading. "It thanks Eleanor for her work as lead investigator on the Morrison case, the corruption investigation that brought down 3 congressmen and a federal judge last year. It was in every newspaper in the country for months." Marcus grabbed the letter with trembling hands, his face draining of color as he read. Cassandra peered over his shoulder, her satisfied smirk replaced by shock. "This says you were undercover for 18 months. Marcus's voice came out as a barely audible whisper. "That you infiltrated a network of corrupt officials and organized crime figures. That your work led to the largest public corruption arrest in state history." The room fell silent except for the soft ticking of Mr. Whitmore's antique grandfather clock. I watched my brother's hands shake as he continued reading. "There's more," he said, his voice breaking. "It mentions the human trafficking ring you helped dismantle in 2019. 37 children rescued. It talks about the Organized Crime Task Force, the drug cartel investigation that nearly got you killed when your cover was almost blown." He looked up at me, tears forming in his eyes. "Eleanor, what exactly do you do?" I'd waited 20 years for this moment. 20 years of family gatherings where Marcus would introduce me as his sister who works for the government somewhere, while he regaled everyone with stories of his business triumphs. 20 years of Cassandra's condescending remarks about my simple life and modest apartment. "I'm a senior special agent with the FBI, I said quietly. "I've been with the Bureau for 18 years. I specialize in deep cover operations involving organized crime and public corruption." Marcus's mouth opened and closed, no sound coming out. Cassandra had gone pale, her perfectly applied makeup standing out starkly against her ashen skin. "The desk job your contacts told you about," I continued, looking at Cassandra. "That's my cover identity. When you're infiltrating criminal organizations, when you're building trust with people who execute witnesses, you need a boring, unremarkable cover story, something that makes people stop asking questions." "But you never told us," Marcus managed to say. "You never said anything. What was I supposed to say? That I spent 6 months living with a motorcycle gang running guns across state lines? That I've testified in closed congressional hearings about national security threats? That I've had 3 different identities in the last 5 years alone? These aren't things you discuss at Sunday dinner, Marcus." Cassandra was crying now, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. "We didn't know." "How could we know?" "You didn't know because you never really looked," I said gently. "You saw what you expected to see. A single woman with a government job. No flashy car, no expensive clothes, no exciting stories to share. You decided that meant I was a failure." Marcus set the letter down with shaking hands. The confident businessman who'd walked in here an hour ago was gone, replaced by someone who looked lost and broken. "Eleanor, I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I've been so cruel to you. For years I've been cruel." I remembered all the times he'd made jokes about my pretend important job, all the family dinners where he'd suggested I should find a rich husband since my career was going nowhere, all the moments he'd dismissed my exhaustion as laziness when I was actually recovering from months of living as someone else. Mr. Whitmore cleared his throat. "There are actually more documents here. Evelyn seems to have collected quite a file. Newspaper clippings about cases where Eleanor's name was mentioned, photos from award ceremonies she couldn't tell you about." "Stop," Marcus said, holding up his hand. "Please, just stop." He was crying openly now, something I hadn't seen since we were children. "Eleanor, how can you ever forgive me? I've been horrible to you. I've spent years telling everyone you were wasting your life, that you were living in some fantasy world." I stood up and walked around the table, sitting down next to my brother. He looked so small suddenly, so much like the little boy who used to follow me everywhere, convinced his big sister could fix anything. "You're my brother," I said softly. "Despite everything, I love you." And Grandmother Evelyn loved both of us enough to make sure this moment happened. She knew the truth would come out when it needed to. Cassandra was sobbing into her hands. "We're terrible people. We judged you, we mocked you. And all this time you were risking your life for others." "You're not terrible people," I said. "You made assumptions based on what you could see. It hurt deeply, but I understand why you believed what you did." Marcus wiped his eyes, looking at me with an expression I'd never seen before. "Respect. Real, genuine respect. The cases mentioned in this letter," he said quietly. "I remember reading about them. The Morrison investigation was huge. They said the lead investigator received death threats, that there were multiple attempts on their life." "That was you?" I nodded. "Among other things, yes." "And the human trafficking ring? Those children who were rescued?" "Also me and my team, though I can't discuss the details." Marcus stood up suddenly and pulled me into a fierce hug, holding me like he was afraid I might disappear. "I'm so sorry, Eleanor. I'm so incredibly sorry. You're a hero, and I've been treating you like you were nothing." "I'm not a hero," I said, returning his embrace. "I'm just someone who does a job that needs doing. But I'm also your sister, and that's never changed." "Will you tell me about it sometime?" Marcus asked, pulling back to look at me. "Whatever you can share, I mean. I want to know who you really are." "Maybe," I said, "if you really want to listen." "I do," he said emphatically. "I really do." Cassandra had composed herself enough to speak. "Eleanor, is there anything we can do to make this right? Anything at all?" I thought about that for a moment. Actually, yes. At the next family gathering, when someone asks what I do, just tell them the truth. Say I work for the FBI. Don't embellish, don't make it dramatic. Just tell them the simple truth. They both nodded eagerly and Marcus squeezed my hand. And the house? Grandmother's house? I'm keeping it, I said. Not to spite you, but because she wanted me to have it. It's where she raised us, where she loved us both. It's home. Of course, Marcus said quickly. It's yours. It was always meant to be yours. As we prepared to leave, Mr. Whitmore handed me another envelope. Evelyn asked me to give this to you privately, after everything was settled. I opened it in the parking lot with Marcus and Cassandra waiting beside me. Inside was a photo of Grandmother Evelyn and me from years ago, taken at my graduation from the FBI Academy. I was in my dress uniform and she was beaming with pride. On the back, she'd written, "My darling girl, you never needed to tell me the details." A grandmother always knows when her granddaughter is saving the world. Marcus read it over my shoulder and started crying again. She knew all along. She always knew, I agreed. She understood that some truths can't be shared, that some sacrifices can't be explained. But she also knew that eventually the people who matter would understand. 3 weeks later, Marcus called me late one evening. "Eleanor, I need to tell you something." "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I just met our new neighbor. She mentioned she works for the State Department. And instead of assuming I knew what that meant, I asked her about it. Really asked. Turns out she's been coordinating humanitarian efforts in war zones for the past decade. She's seen things, done things that matter. And I almost dismissed her as just another bureaucrat. I smiled into the phone. "That's growth, Marcus. It's because of you," he said. "Because of what you taught me. That sometimes the most important work happens in silence. That real heroes don't always wear capes or drive fancy cars. Sometimes they look like ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Everyone has a story, Marcus. We just have to be willing to listen." "Eleanor," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I love you. And I'm proud of you. Prouder than I can ever express. I love you too, little brother. I always have. Even when you were being insufferable. Even then? Especially then. That's what family does. We love each other through the worst parts until we find our way back to the best parts." After we hung up, I sat in Grandmother Evelyn's kitchen, my kitchen now, and thought about forgiveness, about the strength it takes to carry secrets that could save lives, and the grace it takes to forgive those who couldn't see past their own assumptions. Outside the window, her garden was blooming magnificently. She'd spent 40 years tending those flowers, teaching them to grow strong and beautiful without needing anyone's approval or understanding. They bloomed because that's what they were meant to do, regardless of who was watching or who understood their worth, just like her granddaughter. Marcus never again dismissed someone's career without understanding it. Cassandra learned to look deeper, to see beyond the surface. They both grew into better people, not because they were forced to, but because the truth had given them the opportunity to choose differently. And me? I learned that sometimes the greatest victory isn't in the cases you solve or the criminals you catch. Sometimes it's in the quiet moment when your family finally sees you for who you really are, and loves you not in spite of it, but because of it. Grandmother Evelyn had orchestrated one final investigation, one last case to be solved, not with handcuffs or warrants, but with truth and love and the patience to wait for the perfect moment to reveal what had always been there, waiting to be discovered. In her letter to Mr. Whitmore, she'd written one final line: "The truth doesn't need defending. It just needs the right moment to shine." She was right, as always. The truth had waited 20 years, but when it finally emerged, it didn't destroy. It healed. It taught. It brought together what pride had torn apart. And in that attorney's office, watching my brother finally see me for who I was, I understood that Grandmother Evelyn's greatest gift wasn't the house or the money or even the vindication. It was the chance for us to find our way back to each other, to become the family she'd always believed we could be.